Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Hi, this is Eric.
And this is Isaac.
And welcome back to Romulans Bearing Gifts. This could be possibly episode 84 of the podcast. And we have another very random selection. What do you do when you don't have plans to do a podcast, but you decide to talk about Star Trek? This time we turned to a new device. I haven't thought of a good name for it yet. The human randomizer, the icodizer. I don't know what to call it, but coming straight from the head of my co-host tonight, we have The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 17, Samaritan Snare.
Next time on Star Trek The Next Generation, Captain Picard's life is on the line as he faces a critical operation.
This man is dying.
And Geordi is held hostage by alien kidnappers.
Drop your shields. This is the Enterprise. Return our personnel or face immediate reprisal.
2 lives hang in the balance.
The captain needs our help.
Phasers ready, sir.
My friends, my people, they're trying to kill us.
Fire.
On Star Trek The Next Generation.
Isaac, do you think your internal randomizer chose well this time?
Well, it was not because of NCC 17. It had no reason for that. It wasn't. I just literally thought of like season 2, episode 17, because you wanted to do an episode. So that was the first few numbers that I thought I should now go and purchase a lottery ticket for this Friday's jackpot.
Oh wow! So it's unclear to me now. How much approximate TNG have you ever seen just on your own time or whatever?
Not including homework, nothing. And if we're including homework, this and this episode and another one that we're going to do in the future.
Okay. And have you seen any of the movies by chance? TNG.
I've seen... Oh, no, I have not.
Okay, what have you seen of the other movies then?
The most obvious one, of course, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And of course, I was ever present. I think my first Star Trek movie might have been Into Darkness, which I have opinions over.
Everyone's got opinions of some kind.
Mm-hmm, but you haven't heard mine yet.
Well, that's very true.
They're not good.
And you haven't heard mine unless you listen to one of my earliest podcast appearances ever.
Given that you were doing it back in the day.
I'm sorry, that wasn't one of my earliest. But anyway, I'm going to ask another question. Oh yeah, approximately how much TOS have you seen on your own time?
I'd say maybe 1/3 of TOS if we're talking being on like syndication, like on cable TV still.
Yes.
Catching it every now and then. There was... Oh no, that was a Twilight Zone episode. There was an hour-long Twilight Zone episode on the other night that I'd never seen before, but it was in the middle. My dad was watching it in the middle of it, so I'm not going to start like from there. I have to start backwards, but anyway, or rerun the episode. But no, I haven't watched TOS in a while. I should go back and watch it because I like it a lot.
I was just wondering. Okay, so did your chooser choose well?
I don't know. You tell me. I enjoyed it.
Well, then it worked well for you. I'm not trying to suggest that I don't like the episode, but I was just asking how you felt personally.
Yes, no, I guess my initial thoughts on this episode, I don't know if we want to do initial thoughts or not, like initial summary.
Say anything.
Episode. Say anything. So
you can summarize if you want. It's dealer's choice.
Yeah, we'll start off with an initial summary, ladies and gentlemen, those in between unaffiliated. We have, the Enterprise is going about its business. One ensign, Wesley Crusher, I almost want to say Will Wheaton. And by the way, I didn't even realize that his name has only one L. I'm like, oh, it's like that short for Wilford or something like that. Wilfred, excuse me, not Wilford. One ensign Wesley Crusher is to go to Starfleet Academy and perform an exam Meanwhile, there's this mysterious medical examination or treatment that Captain Picard needs to go through. And he has to go to, again, the same place that Wesley is going to, a starbase. And he's a little embarrassed. He's a little red in the face over this one. He's like, huffing and puffing. He's in a huff of just like, I will not have such, medical examinations be done to me, or at least, be embarrassed by it. While those two are off, the Enterprise finds itself a stranded vessel, marooned, it would seem, and they need assistance. Geordi LaForge goes over there and lends a helping hand to them like a good neighbor. But unfortunately, these guys are part of a state, and they require him to be part of their farm. So many things happen from there.
Wait, you said they're part of a state? Is that what you said?
I basically was trying to make like a good neighbor State Farm is there.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, is this like an Animal Farm reference?
It could be. You don't know.
I didn't know what was going on. Okay, go on.
They could be. And intrigue ensues into how they can return and retrieve their friends. At the same time, certain plot lines align and or intersect. What happens then? Well, let's give it a little discussion and find out what happens in this episode, The Samaritan Snare.
So, couple things. This is one of those, and this doesn't happen with every episode of TNG for me, but there's a fair amount that I just remember seeing it day on date. Like I remember watching it live the first time it aired, very much so, just because. And I started watching TNG from the premiere, day on date, because I was already a huge TOS fan growing up, and I was excited as any young kid that a new series was going to come. So I was there day one, and I saw most of them the day they premiered. And this one stuck in my head just because of the Packlids and the way they spoke and their personalities. Just as I think I was in middle school when this came out. Oh, or maybe I was in elementary. I don't know.
89.
I think I was in middle school. And it just stuck with me, the way they spoke. And because I remember the next day and probably the rest of that week at school talking to my best friend who had also seen it, and just me mimicking the character's demeanor. Inaccurately, of course, because I didn't have it videotaped at the time. I couldn't go back and rewatch it. So going over this episode with my best friend is just from that one initial viewing and going from memory without having the ability to rewatch it. And then as with many TNG episodes, especially early seasons, many of them I only saw 2 times in my life. And usually, not all, but most episodes, sometimes all episodes, would air 2 times during that season year. So they would usually play every episode, not just Star Trek, but most shows in general in the United States. They would play the episode the first time, and then weeks later, sometimes months later, they would repeat it 1 time. And then that's it. You would never see it again unless you videotaped it yourself. And so a lot of these early TNGs, I saw them 2 times before they went into widespread syndication later, obviously. But even though I watched TNG and later syndication, I didn't see every single episode. Therefore, I just saw the 2 times they were on television initially. And I'm pretty sure this is one of those, and I'd never seen it again since. I don't know, I didn't do the research. Possibly this alien race comes up one more time in TNG, but not like a whole episode focused on them. But we never really saw them again, I believe, in TNG. You never know with DS9, like maybe they had some in the background one time. I couldn't tell you without looking it up. But they're not a race we ever came back to very much. But yeah, that's why the episode stuck in my head. And I kind of, even though I only saw it twice the year it came out, it's pretty easy to remember the overall plot and everything. So, what say you on your reaction to this?
Well, let's see. If I had to put my sign, I think I'll give it a good feeling it right here, a strong one. At that, my board, the Samaritan Snare, made me feel like we have a good opening, and or at least character reveal, looking more into the psyche of Picard, at the same time as we have the Enterprise figure out a way to get out of a dangerous scenario. My best thing is the little scene, the aside that Picard gives to Wesley inside their transport ship, looking back on his life as he was inexperienced and a hothead full of hot air. My worst thing is I wish there was at least a single line that at least states what became of said aliens or said marooners, and or at least these people are dangerous, and or at least you should do not listen to their mayday. So I wish there was at least a single line, but other than that, Eric, what say you?
There's something about, at least to me, well, not only me, but especially the first 2 seasons of TNG. It's early TNG. It's generally speaking, the first 2 seasons are, in my opinion, where the show is still finding its identity. Because I felt like that was much more solidified in season 3 and onward past that point. So a lot of the stories in the first 2 seasons to me feel like they could just be random Star Trek type tales, meaning you could easily, like, this could have been an unused script for the original series or what. I'm not saying it was, but I'm just saying, like, it's very interchangeable. And in the first 2 seasons, they didn't have their structure down packed, although this feels like the structure which would become the signature structure that Carl talks about often when it comes to TNG. So it actually does feel like more modern episodes, but still, in the first couple of years, the style of stories was more experimental because they were just trying different things until they kind of got it down. So this definitely feels like season 1, season 2 to me. And it's still basic, but it was fun for me to revisit it, to see it all again, and to pick up the loose ends. Now, I can't remember. I'm sorry, I don't have the Star Trek knowledge all pristine in my memory banks like I used to 20 plus years ago. But I believe this is the second time they've referenced the fracas that Picard had gotten into where he got injured. I believe it was an episode in season 1 where they first brought that up and got more into it. Someone tell me if I'm wrong, if this came first, but I don't think this came first before that other episode. I think the other one was first. And we learn more in the previous episode, more about the backstory, about how he got his injury from a Nausicaan. And that injury would get referenced more later in the show. So it's one of the pivotal moments, I guess, in the backstory and development of the Picard character in general. Because there would just be, I don't know, there's just so many references. And not only with TNG, certainly in Lower Decks and other Star Trek entities, they'll make reference to that species. Do you know who the Nausicaans are, Isaac, or what they look like?
Oh boy, Keo's probably having a chuckle right now in the editing room, given that I'll drop that piece of knowledge in a second. But do they happen to look like bugs, or do they resemble giant insectoids, or even what they were ancient trilobites? No, whatever they were called from the Cretaceous period. Anyway, I do not know what species.
Troglodytes?
Not troglodytes. Trilobites. believe that's a real thing. But no, I have no.
I think both are a real thing, but two different things.
Troglodytes are what I am, but no, I don't. No, I'm not familiar with the asterisks Nausicaans. What's
The easiest way to describe their physical appearance is they have heads and faces that somewhat resemble the Predator with no mask on.
oh, how come they? How come? Well, I don't know when they were first revealed, like on screen. I assume
They came out. They came out after the Predator.
I was going to
films.
say like
They're not identical, but
No, I know.
it's it. Many people like that was their initial reaction was, "Hey, this kind of looks like a Predator."
Mandibles, of course, like probably. So, in a way, insectoid. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and also this being, earlier seasons of TNG. I guess the thing that stood out to me the most in this episode, seeing it again now, and you get this with a lot of episodes, first 2 years, the different main cast or crew of the Enterprise, they don't always seem like you know them to be if you've watched the series as a whole. Like their characters are not fully formed yet, and so they almost seem schizophrenic, to misuse a term. And there was one aspect about Picard in this episode that felt not very Picardy, especially, if you watch the whole show or something. And that he was so hung up. And again, Doctor Who fans will have this same kind of argument like I'm about to give, which is, oh, but this is when he was younger and, he wasn't yet that fully formed man. Yeah, I guess. Makes sense. But anyway, this whole idea about how he wants to go to the space station to get his operation, and it's primarily because he doesn't want the crew to know about it. He doesn't want people, he doesn't want to be mocked about it or feel lesser, and he wouldn't want the indignity of Dr. Pulaski to do it herself just because she's sort of like in his orbit, like on a regular basis. It feels weird that the character Picard would have all these hang-ups, because that just does not seem like the Picard that we know later. But what do you make of that? But I just couldn't stop thinking about that, because that's just not who Picard is later. Like, such a self-doubter, and it's just weird in hindsight, looking back.
Well, I'm not. Well, forgive me for potentially going there. I'm not really too familiar with the ways military works. Whether I mean in real life or science fiction, I think I prefer fiction nonfiction. I'm not sure if such captains in the Navy are don't divulge if they're going to give blood or if they're going to have a kidney be removed to give to somebody else potentially. I'm not really too sure about that. I don't see. I assume this was to be a character flaw, as the writers intended, because I don't see.
I don't know about character flaw as much as humanizing.
Oh, I see. I suppose I more saw it as just like, I mean, is there a point to this? Like, why is he so kind of staunch and a sourpuss about it?
Well, he's prideful, I guess.
Prideful, yeah. No, why does he feel like he has a stick up his butt there? Of like, it's just a heart operation. Is it just? I guess it's now the crew up to this point. Again, forgive me. I haven't seen everything prior, but perhaps the crew thinks to him be like infallible. Pretty much like, oh, he is so wise and he's so above us all, that to find out that he has a simple heart, like artificial heart, like Dick Cheney.
Okay, that's an interesting way to put it.
Like, how can he? Well, he's definitely not personality wise Dick Cheney. Listen, that's the first thing that I thought of when they said artificial heart. I'm like, well, I mean, that's the one person I know about that of, or Crank 2.
Oh yeah, and no, I don't think a military officer, especially a captain, which is people not in the Navy, even people who are in the military but not in the Navy, don't this often gets lost in translation, especially with Star Trek and people watching movies. But I found it confusing when I was younger until I learned, like, why is the captain such a big deal? Because that rank is still almost like a junior officer rank, like, but it doesn't seem that way. That's because the Navy names everything differently,
Yes.
uniquely compared to the other branches, and a lot of people don't get that. Even people in the service don't get that, so
Yes.
it's confusing. So a captain is like the equivalent of what people are more familiar with as a colonel, and a colonel outside of the Navy is a lot more significant than a normal captain.
Because then it's admiral above captain, correct?
Yes, because admiral is like general.
Yes.
In the real world Navy, the Starfleet doesn't align perfectly, but it's more or less along the same lines.
They tried.
The modern day Navy rank structure.
Because Roddenberry was in the Navy, correct?
Right.
Not a captain.
No. And so if we're thinking a colonel, no, a colonel would not go around like publicizing, like people would never know in the real world, our world. But their XO, aka the number one, you would think he would at least tell him. It's weird that he wouldn't at least tell Will Riker. But again, I think it's just for the dramatic tension of this episode on its own. I think that's why it is the way it is. It's written the way it is. It's just if we treat this like this is like a real future documentary or based on a true story from the future, that's where it gets a little bit more weird. Like, why would he? Because a real life colonel, not 100% of the time, but I'm sure they wouldn't have a problem explaining to their XO something like that. So it just feels funny how uptight. And also, I don't know if you know, so Dr. Pulaski, who's the doctor in the beginning on the ship,
Yes.
she was only in season 2. And so unless you're familiar, with watching a lot of TNG, you don't know that right from the very beginning, when she becomes part of the crew, she is constantly butting heads with Picard. So it's not just this episode. They already have a history of like not getting along. Just want to make that clear. It's not just like, oh, this one time he's upset because of his operation. No, they don't like each other. They're constantly butting heads always.
Interesting. Kind of the opposite of what we would have with Kirk and Bones.
Oh, yeah, definitely the opposite. Definitely. They are not really friends, I mean, in this world at all.
Now, if I may ask, is that just, due to personal, like, different philosophies that they both have, or their different career paths? I'm not going to assume that they dated at one point. No, I'm not going there, even though I just said it. But, like, I just assumed that...
Well, he did that with the other doctor. It'd be weird if he had dated both his doctors before.
Well, he has a thing for doctors. What can you say?
So I would say it's more that Dr. Pulaski, she just has this kind of maverick attitude inherently.
Interesting.
And she inherently kind of has an issue with authority in general and doesn't like to be told what to do when it pertains to her area of expertise or experience. She's very headstrong in that way. And here's the thing. The previous Doctor Who was in season 1, who would return in season 3 onward, she obviously was not like that type of character. So Pulaski is just almost like a polar opposite personality-wise. And here's another thing I guess you don't know, but me and Carl have certainly discussed it on this podcast before. So, they got Pulaski, and they obviously wrote her to be that way, kind of confrontational. According to Carl, because he's a little older and he remembers better back then, because I was, in middle school when this came out, this season 2. Apparently fans really, really hated the new Dr. Pulaski. Apparently, because I don't remember this, but Carl has told me this on the podcast, people really didn't like how she was. They really didn't like how she didn't get along with the rest of the crew like a normal Starfleet person. And so she is not remembered fondly by fans, longtime fans in general.
Similar to what's her face from season 1.
Tasha Yar?
Yes, her. Yeah, thank you.
People liked her. She was a bit what's the word? Like
Loose cannon.
No, yes, she was, but no, she was a little bit like Worf. Like her character, she felt kind of one dimensional, one note, and she didn't have as fully formed a personality as the other key crew. She did have some episodes, that obviously focused on her. But outside of those, she almost felt like an afterthought amongst the crew, even in season 1. But people were, I don't know how much people cared about her before her demise or departure from the show, but people seem to care a whole lot after after she was gone. And the backstory on that is Denise Crosby, the actress, she just felt like she wasn't getting used enough in the show.
I've heard this. Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, so despite what Carl had informed me about everyone hating Pulaski, I liked her as a kid and like, oh yeah, she's different. But when we revisited TNG starring her on this podcast some years ago, and I rewatched it then and seeing her, older me, my modern day me, I found her delightful as all hell as a grown up.
I agree.
I think she's great because this is another discussion Carl and I and other Doctor Who, Star Trek fans have had this conversation elsewhere, which is, as much as I love TNG growing up, the one thing I got kind of tired of by the end, and then transferring over to Voyager as well, especially, it bothered me how generally our main Starfleet characters were always just good moralistic people. Like, they'd have these little issues, little personality flaws, but they'd be temporary and fleeting. And that really started to bother me about television Star Trek in general as I got older, like graduated from high school, went to college. It kind of like made the show kind of start losing appeal to me because of the way characters were written. And those types of characters who seem so goody-goody all the time kind of seemed like they only existed in Star Trek at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s. Because when you watched other shows, even other sci-fi shows, it was just like, no, like this is better. Like this is more realistic, more refreshing, these characters and other properties. But anyway, so as an adult, seeing Pulaski back when we did it some years ago on this podcast, I found her delightful as hell. I loved how she was like this maverick. I loved how she would have this attitude. She would talk to Picard in a way nobody else on the ship would talk to Picard. And I always thought that was cool. And because she was that way with him, he would always get defensive. Not just in this episode. Like, he definitely didn't like this one person on his crew, like, always butting heads with him. So he would always instantly, like, his own personal shields up. Like, here comes Pulaski.
Yeah, obviously he's a big believer in the chain of command. But it's not to a dictatorish sensibility, of course. I don't know if he's asking or yelling, I don't know, ordering her to be, be in line, go in line or whatever, trying to avoid talking about episode 8. But I agree. I actually do like, and, upon hearing that she kind of, is retired, or at least they retire her character, that's kind of a shame. I kind of wish they kept her on for a few more seasons and kind of grew that that relationship with Picard. Not just in that, like, maybe they would eventually find, like, common ground somewhere and agreeing upon something. That would have been really cool to have done. But if that is the case, that is kind of a shame, that a missed opportunity.
And it seems funny to me that, again, longtime fans from back in the day don't particularly fondly remember her. And I guess many were happy to see her go and be replaced by who she replaced. But it's funny to me because in the series Discovery, there is one character I particularly like in that crew on that show. And it's not just me, it's other people too. And what I find funny about it is the one character I really like in the Discovery crew, she has a lot in common personality wise with Pulaski. So I find it funny that Pulaski was not very appreciated in TNG back in the day. But that other character who's very similar is quite liked and adored in that series Discovery. I just find that a little interesting.
Perhaps audiences have changed and they cannot stand a person of Picard's abilities and would prefer to see somebody be at odds with him.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, she's great, and I wish she at least would have just showed up or something, even if she wasn't a regular part of the crew again. And I forgot, in an episode we did almost 2 years ago on RBG, or maybe it was like a year and a half ago, the actress who plays Pulaski was in TOS in one episode.
Was she really?
Yeah, we did her on this podcast. If you go back 10 episodes or so in the feed, she was in the episode, and she was looking great in the 1960s. Let me tell you what. Let me tell you what.
An alum. That's amazing.
She was a looker, and yes, it was through a 60s chauvinistic lens, as many of the female guest stars were, like the female of the week on TOS. But she is one of the more memorable for me out of all TOS.
Did Kirk kiss her?
No, it was sort of a Spock thing, if I remember correctly.
Spock's wife? No.
They didn't get romantic or anything, but there was like a mutual attraction of some kind.
Spock mutually attracted to somebody?
Yeah, but I might be misremembering the episode, but I know Kirk had to go though.
Well, it's Kirk. I mean,
but I think they set like an attraction in the sense of, how it started was like a mutual intellectual interest. Because I think she was like a researcher, scientist, psychologist of sorts, her character. And so I think that's how they initially bonded. Oh, by the way, fun fact, because the episode's in front of me right now playing, and we're at 37:23, and Geordi's on board the ship, the Packlet ship, and he's helping them with like their next problem, and he pulls out his little engineer pack set thing that he opens up and pulls some devices out of, some tools, his little toolkit. It's so funny. I didn't notice it when I was watching the episode earlier today, but this was a prop used throughout early seasons, especially of TNG, that Geordi had. It was always funny to me because that kit that he has, it was a plastic audio cassette case that was sold around all over the place in the late 80s, early 90s. And I had the exact tape cassette carrier, and it held something like 32 audio cassettes. And all my favorite audio cassettes I had growing up, I kept in that case. And I always thought it was so funny that Geordi's engineer kit is literally that tape case. The exterior is unchanged, and they added some little like line striping, but that was my tape case growing up.
I guess if I could say something about the Packians, how do you say their name again?
Packlets, I believe.
Packlids, thank you. Just saw it on screen there. They remind me. I don't want to sound like I'm talking down to them, but at least the costume design wise, I was getting throwbacks almost to Barf of Spaceballs.
Oh wow, yeah.
I was like, oh, John Candy could honestly play one of these guys. Hopefully that didn't come across as offensive, but it's just like, kind of some just with like the eyebrows. I mean,
no, I totally get that. What's weird about it? It's weird how because usually when I podcast on other podcasts, I don't tread lightly, but for some reason I feel that way sometimes. Talking about Star Trek, I don't know why.
Well, I mean,
Well, you're familiar with how many people suggest that Ferengi are based on racial stereotypes,
so I've heard.
and you have some idea of those connections people draw, whether they were intentional or not.
I tend to not look at people's caricatures or stereotypes in real life, as it just makes things muddy and nonsensical of like, okay, whatever, but continue.
So, depending on who you are, Ferengi could be considered problematic when viewed through modern eyes, or even eyes of the time that they came out in Star Trek. It only occurred to me just now that the Packlets, because on the one hand you go, oh yeah, all the actors who portray them seem to be like heavy-set, middle-aged white
Husky.
men, whatever, But furthermore, because they have that sort of the speech pattern, we look for stuff. They have that almost like droning, almost like a caveman speak, but not exactly, but simplistic in that way. But because their faces look the way they do, on top of their characteristics and being a little heavy set, I don't even want to bring up the term DS, but my adult brain can't help but like wonder as I look and think about them now. Just like, because when I was younger, I didn't even know what a Jewish person was. Like when I was younger, that was just a word I had heard, Jewish, but I didn't really know what that meant. And so obviously I had no thoughts about Ferengi in that way, because I didn't even, not only did I not know the stereotype, I didn't even know what the real people were like anyway. So that wasn't a thought until I was much older as it pertained to Ferengi and DS9. So now it's only my adult brain that looks at these Packlets now and just the way they look and their faces and the way they talk and their mannerisms. Like through a modern lens, this could be seen problematic now retroactively. And I don't know, because I wasn't an adult back when this came out, but would that have just been something that seemed obvious to an adult watching this when it aired? Like, oh, these are kind of a caricature of quote unquote slow people.
But then they kind of subvert that idea immediately into like there was deception, lies.
That's true, and that is definitely playing into a stereotype. I mean, that could be part of the point of the story. Not judge a book but by its cover, which is fine. But one wonders about these things, because the Ferengi thing in retrospect seems extremely obvious and hard to dispute. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. But you'll never see any creator on Star Trek ever admit that there's any truth in that.
How about those like medical outfits that they were wearing on the starbase?
Wild. It seems like something out of a different sci-fi property besides Star Trek.
I could see this I could see this originating, or at least being in the same universe as TOS. Like I feel like we'd have someone.
The reason I could see it being part of TOS specifically is because it's so similar to Q's costume in the first episode.
I've seen images of that.
Right, so it feels like that. There was some alien race in TOS where by the way, did you say TOS right now or did you say TNG?
I said TOS.
You said TOS, I heard TNG, so I mentioned Q. But in TOS there was some alien race and their costumes reminded me of the way the I can't remember the names of the two families in Romeo and Juliet. The Montagues.
Capulets.
The Montagues and the Capulets. Oh, I remember Capulets. I couldn't remember Montague. But in the 1969-1970 Romeo and Juliet, they had this sort of like theatrical costuming in the movie, which was kind of common in the late 60s, early 70s anyways. And there was some type of medieval like planet where their costumes were that same way as the Romeo and Juliet movie, and also kind of reminded me of these surgeon like future Starfleet scrubs that they have here in this episode. But they do seem odd at the same time. Like again, for TNG, they fit into me because of Q, but not much else. But they look like costumes that could be out of other sci-fi. Like I could see someone being, even though there's nothing like it, I could see someone dressed like that, like in THX 1138.
Yeah.
Or have you ever seen Logan's Run from 77 or 76?
I have actually. Yeah, no, Caleb and I talked about it. I have.
That kind of appearance, like that costuming feels to me like something out of that world.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny because Michael York is in that movie, and he's also
Oh, is he Romeo?
no, he's not Romeo,
Oh,
but
okay.
whichever family is the bad one in the story. Or I guess it would be Romeo's family because they're against the Juliet's family. I think it's like Romeo's really good friend in the story is Michael York, and he's like the chief antagonist and he's involved in that crazy duel that happens. So Michael York's that guy. It's funny he's in both, but yeah, it's kind of strange, but it reminds me of older sci-fi.
Yeah, like I said, something out of toss.
And I don't know if we ever see it again. Maybe we do once or twice, but certainly not very much do we ever see that costuming again in this Star Trek universe.
I could see it being worn by the Cosmic Pantheon, but again, because we're out of the 60s, the Cosmic Pantheon does not exist well past TNG, other than, I guess, Q.
There's episodes of Voyager where there are characters from other cultures who maybe shop at the same store. They got these surgical outfits.
Oh, nice. Sweet.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a through line. I don't know if it was the same person throughout the whole 90s who was one of the chief costume designers on Star Trek, but there's a certain kind of look, that fashion aesthetic of 90s Star Trek. Like you get it with like Wesley's costume, like in this episode and this season, because he wears the same thing the whole season. And the surgical outfits, and especially Jake went to the same department store on DS9 because all his civilian clothes, it's like they all go to the same shop.
So I'd like to make a, like, not shout, but not to pivot somewhere. I'd like to at least give praise to, which I didn't even realize they worked on this. I should have realized this, of course, but I was shocked knowing that ILM was involved in this show. Some of the model work on this, when it's not the special edition, because once again, I think I prefer the non-special edition myself. I don't like the opening, at least the modern opening. I prefer what it probably would have looked like back in the day, despite it probably looking like
Whoa. The opening is unchanged.
Was it not? Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's exactly the same.
It looks modern to me, but fair enough. I'm like, if that's...
The only thing they cleaned up, now they might have used modern techniques for certain little aspects of the opening, to make it high definition. But even so, it could be heavily remastered, let's say. But it is exactly true to the original. Like they haven't maybe they up-res, but they didn't digitally replace or anything like that. You know what I mean?
They didn't. Okay, so none of it's CGI.
No, it looks to me like it's the original physical model of the Enterprise, and the appearance of the planets and everything is exactly the same. So if they remade it, they made it look exactly like the original, just high definition. Like they didn't, like in TOS, the planets are obviously redone for special edition because they in no way really resemble the original. But this is like doing a reconstruction that is 99.9% true to the original.
Very well. Anyway, but the models of like the
Packlet.
But yeah, no, the ship, the Packland ship, the transport ship, and even the Enterprise all look fantastic. And big shout out to the Starbase as well. The Starbase they're on, the lead into that itself, like just the whatever, like artist rendition of San Francisco or whatever Bay Area that's supposed to be. But they futurized it. That's a word. But they kind of just added some future elements to it. Kind of weirdly enough, I mean, it is the 80s after all. It's reminding me of a bit of Alan Moore's run, and For the Man Who Has Everything of Superman comic, where we go back to Krypton and see what it looks like with an 80s aesthetic almost.
Yeah. That's something that, you will see throughout 90s Trek. They kind of have that down because there's other places, other locations that kind of have that vibe when you get the exterior shots, etc. But it's funny, speaking of the ships, because the Packlet ship, I believe, is one of those that was repurposed and reused in different capacities throughout TNG and probably beyond TNG. So you'll see that ship or the model, the prop, be used again, but not for Packlets. And sometimes they'll just stick on like an extra bit to make it as if it's another alien race or something. Interesting you should bring it up because I had just a random video came on my YouTube algorithm a few days ago, and there's this channel called Adam Savage's Tested, and I don't know, forgive my ignorance if someone knows better than me. I think he's one of the guys from the Mythbusters, because I never watched that show.
Adam Savage, Jamie?
Yeah, Adam Savage.
There you go. Yep, he's from Mythbusters.
So this is his independent channel, and he has a lot of different content on there on his personal channel, but most of it has to do with movie effects and his own personal model building.
Yes.
And an episode from his feed, which I'd never watched before, just came up, and I decided to watch it just because I guess recently they had an auction of lesser known, lesser popular models from the TNG era, the 90s era of Star Trek. Well, they were auctioning other things, but obviously he just focused on the Star Trek ships. So they pull out 3 models, and no, they don't have the Packlet ship, but watching this video and them examine these models up close and personal, and most of these models, similar to the Packlet ship, they're mostly about 3 feet long in real life. And to see the 3 that they pulled out and to like really look closely and see their textures and painting up close, it's very fascinating. It's interesting because, up close, you see how not detailed they are, but they still look really great. And obviously they looked good enough for the series. Now, of course, the Enterprise model, the primary Enterprise D, that model is absolutely massive in real life, or was. Like, I can't remember, it's like 6 feet long, or it's absolutely huge. No, it's probably more than 6 feet. It's absolutely massive. So it's understandable the detail that it has. But yeah, that was the original ship. I mean, the Packlet ship looked the same. It wasn't like a CGI reconstruction as far. It looked like the original model to me. And yeah, Trek wouldn't start having more digital effects and ships or digital ships. That didn't start happening more until like the mid and especially late 90s. So you can really tell in the earlier years, especially TNG, that most all the ships are physical models. Because those early CGI ones often did not look great.
Again, testing it out.
I don't have too much more to highlight, and I don't want to just pad this episode incessantly. But another thing that kind of stuck out to me watching it now for the first time in probably 30 years and change was, so Worf in most episodes, especially early seasons, but even till the end of the show, Worf is the character, for better or worse, who always has to say the obvious thing. Like, that just seems to be his lot in life on the crew. Whenever they have, what are they called? Whenever they had the little meetings in the ready room, etc., Worf always has to say the obvious thing. And usually when he says the obvious thing, it's like, no, we can't do that because blah, 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 blah. And he'll usually get shot down all the time. And he usually has the wrong answer. Because he has typically an impulsive reaction to everything that he's contemplating. And this time, Worf did what he always did and said the obvious thing. Wait, we don't know who these people are. We don't know what's going on. And Riker is so smug and so brash. I mean, he has his moments outside of this episode, but he is almost wildly over the top in this episode. And then later, when Counselor Troy comes in and is like, wait, stop. Who are these guys? What's going on? Geordi's over there? What? These guys got a super bad vibe. And Riker's like, what are you talking about? No, these guys are, they don't have much capability. They're not very smart. And she's like, no. And then something starts to go wrong. I mean, then Riker realizes, oh, maybe there is something in what Counselor Troy is saying. I was instantly thinking, watching it today, man, Worf needs to look at him and be like, huh? And then they actually did it for a second. They didn't really dwell on it, but they did give a moment where finally Riker looks over his shoulder and Worf is like, uh-huh. But I was like, man, they should have milked it for more. Because this is one of the times when Worf gloriously gets to be right. Because he's almost always wrong. But man, he was right, and I don't feel like he enjoyed it enough in this instance.
Well, yeah, I feel bad for the character. I don't know if character progression. I don't know if character progression occurs in the show where he still has that idea of, oh, we need to, immediately attack, but he learns to kind of halt and hold back those inhibitions, and instead wait. Let's think about this for a second. Let's think. It's the opposite of Spock. Spock always was logical. In this case, Worf would be impulsive. But I would presume maybe because they were sticking with Worf will never change and he'll continue to have this. I forget the backstory, but I don't remember if he's raised similar to Spock, where he's got like a human half to him, sort of. I'm not too sure, but I don't know if he just, for some reason, I guess people can stand Spock despite some of his more eccentric, or at least his strong beliefs, and original TOS, of course. But with Worf, I would hope that there is some character progression where he does get to maybe hold off on his Klingon tendencies. And
so certainly over time, over the course of the series, all the characters go through some arc for sure, individually. And Worf does as well. And yes, he does evolve in that way, as you say, but he is still the guy, even as he evolves. Because you just kind of need that dynamic where somebody says the obvious thing so that other characters can talk about why that's not a good idea. Because Worf is almost like the stand-in for the casual viewer who is just like, or if these were novelizations, the casual reader who's just like, wait a second, why don't they just do this? And so Worf is almost the voice on paper who has to say the obvious thing so the other characters can say, no, this is why we're not necessarily going to go down that road. So he has like a function, like on paper. So even though he evolves, he still has that function. But if I remember his backstory, I believe Worf is 100% human, but as a child, I think he was orphaned and then raised by a human family.
Wait. Sorry. You said 100% human?
No, Klingon.
Okay.
I believe he was 100% Klingon, but in his youth, he was orphaned because and I'm not getting into spoilers, but I also I can't remember exactly, but I think his biological father gets killed in disgrace, and so Worf, as the progeny, gets ostracized from his culture, his race, as a child, and then I gets raised by surrogate human parents, if I remember correctly.
So the opposite of Michael Burnham.
Sort of, yeah, yeah. And even though Worf is Worf when he's on the bridge or in the ready room, uh, there's definitely episodes where he interacts with full-bred, born and raised Klingons, and that's when his humanity really comes out. Because you see, in that type of contrast, when he's around full-bred Klingons, then you see how much he's been humanized. And so when it's just Worf and a bunch of Klingons, he seems like the rational one, compared to them.
So, as much as it might seem out of nowhere that Picard suddenly develops you could say they're just like doing it for dramatic effect, where there's that like part where all of a sudden they're like, oh, this will be a cinch, like Murphy's Law of like, oh, we're all going to go home for dinner. They're not going home for dinner. The doctors, excuse me. They did at least, I think, cover their bases with the fact that Picard did verbally state there's a 2.4% chance of this operation not going well. And, I believe if that's how I read as how Wesley said it, correct? Where he's like, there's a 2.4% chance of it not going well.
Right.
So at least that was there to, I think, cover the writer's bases of saying, well, this is that 2.4%. Because, of course, it's going to happen for dramatic effect. We need the Doctor from the Enterprise to get over into the starbase. And, conveniently, we're kind of tied up with getting Geordi out of, harm's way because he's being captured by these hooligans. And again, I like the fact that potentially they put the Enterprise in a scenario where it would be interesting to see how this is a good like what if of how would Picard have handled this whole situation. But they obviously didn't do that. But instead they have the swashbuckling because he's again supposed to be Kirk, but in TNG instead.
Yeah.
We have Riker instead. How does he react? Is he going to go in like, guns blazing? They didn't do that. And they gave like they made sure that everybody kind of like talked about this over. They still were kind of rational. They had the spirits of Picard still within them. And they were able to, while they, got duped and foiled by these here hecklings, sorry, whatever they're called, I forget.
Packlets.
Hecklins.
Yeah, certainly older Riker would never have made this mistake. I mean, his character, there's no way. But I guess, obviously, again, this is younger Riker. But older Riker, you just couldn't even imagine her making this kind of mistake. I just thought of a few more things. What were they? This whole thing about the Samaritan Snare, I mean, the name of it and everything, and the setup. It's one of the oldest cons in the books, especially in old, like, pulp novels and 70s B movies. Not just the 70s, but I'm just thinking of the 70s right now.
Yes.
It reminds me of a 70s B movie I saw a few months back randomly on Tubi or elsewhere. Truck Stop Women from perhaps something like 1974, thereabouts. And I thought it was pretty good for a B movie. I was into it. And the whole premise was, yes, there are these working women, who work out of a particular truck stop. We get that. But there's this whole organized crime operation underneath it. And so what happens is the matriarch of the truck stop / madame, she will send her girls out like in pairs, and they take this 73 Mustang and they pretend like it's broken down on the side of the road with the hood up. And then they'll lure a trucker to stop and help them, and then they'll ask for a lift, and then they'll not apprehend, subdue him while he's giving them a ride, and then they'll take his truck and they take it back to the truck stop, and then they take whatever goods are in the back of the truck, and then they repaint the truck a la Grand Theft Auto so that it's unrecognizable, and then use it for their own devices. And so, yeah, that's an old trope, but check out that movie if you're into that kind of thing.
You got it.
I thought it was one of the better B movies of the 70s.
It's funny. I did wonder if this, like the Samaritan Snare, I wondered if this was like an already existing, I guess, story
Trope.
Trope, yeah. If you want,
100%.
Okay.
You'd see it all the time. Also, like in westerns, there'd be someone down and out who needs help, and whatever. But it turns out, yeah, they're like a baddie in disguise. Oh yeah, tons of examples.
So with Picard and his whole backstory, like I said, it was my favorite part of the episode itself. Being self-reflective and introspective, where we literally just have him and Wesley like just inside the transport ship. Really, really well done. Stewart, as always, is a professional actor and thespian for Pitt's sakes. And he just delivered, just him eating a sandwich. I don't know. I maybe this is a little over the top. I was moved by it. And,
Wow.
Just not knowing this backstory, and like, I prefer, perhaps in other series, they've probably maybe like modern day stuff. They've like gone back into the Nausicaans, attack on him, or him getting into a tussle with them, excuse me. But instead, I prefer what my mind's eye tells me instead, or at least what I conjured up in my mind instead. And yeah, just kind of, you're right, humanizing him and him kind of reflecting on that with Wesley in mind, and almost giving him a bunch of advice. Yeah, a bunch of advice for later on as he journeys and becomes goes into the Starfleet and becomes an officer potentially. It's like, yeah, I kind of like that. He giving like grandfatherly or fatherly advice, because we do talk about the like, oh, would you ever be a father, or like you don't like kids, which I think I know about Picard. But again, yeah, just one of those fellows who not a career man. He's too committed. His drive is being a captain. So that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I appreciated about this episode.
Yeah, actually, thinking more on this, what you're bringing up, this is a significant story. The A story, which I'm going to call the Packlet incident, I'm going to call that the A story.
Being bamboozled.
That is not really significant in the grand scheme of things in terms of the series or whatnot. But the scenes with Wesley in the shuttle and the things they talk about, that alone makes this episode much more significant in the lore of TNG than it would be, because yes, the Nausicaans, I believe, were referenced in season 1 with Picard, but then we continue to see the seeds of building his character, that like what they were talking about, some of the things they were talking about in the shuttle will reverberate throughout the future of this Picard character, and become much bigger deals later in the series, in the movies, in the Picard series revival. So because of the Picard dynamics explored here, even if it's in a small way, if you were a big fan of the character Picard in general, that would make this episode a must-see. But except for that element, this, I do not believe, would be on any must-see list of Star Trek episodes, except for that. And that line I was going to highlight too, where he says, oh, you don't really like, I get the idea you don't really like kids that very much. And Picard's kind of like, right. And then Wesley says it's a shame because you'd make a really good or great father. again, that's very important for the character of Picard going forward and onward. That extremely significant. Um, and there was one more thing about that. Yeah, it's made very clear in season one, right out the gate with this show, especially with Wesley being like the first youthful regular cast or crew member in Star Trek. You know, right from the first episode of this series, Picard is extremely bothered in a Sean Homrig kind of way with this kid being anywhere around him. So that's like they doubled down on that in season one, how much Picard can't stand this teenager hanging around. So this is furthering like this episode, and that interaction is definitely a step in the evolution of their relationship. Oh, the thing I forgot a little while ago was uh, um, pre-show you were asking about this incident in the episode, and you wondered if it was another actress before she became famous. And while it's not that actress,
Oh, right.
I wish Carl was here because he would be able to answer this question or query I have, because there's an ensign in TNG around this time, and I believe she was in another TNG episode that we've already covered on this podcast, and we talked about her a lot in whatever episode that was. And Carl had mentioned and reminded me back then that they were trying to establish this female ensign as like a recurring like background character on the show. And that ensign in question, she maybe had like 3 appearances as a background character, and then we never saw her again. And I can't tell if she's the same one, the same ensign in question, or if she just really resembles her. And I'm on the fence about it. I didn't feel like doing research to find out if she is the ensign. But Carl would know if he was here, damn it.
Because he looks stuff up in an encyclopedia.
Well, he just remembers this stuff better than I do from back then. I don't know, perhaps because he was a bit older or something. But so she might be the ensign, and she wasn't the only one they did that with. There's been a few other ensigns and whatnot, not just in TNG but the other shows as well, where they're just kind of this sometimes unnamed, sometimes named recurring background character, kind of like how Chief O'Brien was, until, of course, I think he was Ensign O'Brien at first, and that's a whole other Star Trek fan conversation. How does he go from being an officer to essentially a warrant officer? Because it seems like a backward step, but that's a Star Trek conversation for another day. But Miles O'Brien was one of those background reoccurring characters before he became more established. And so Star Trek in the 90s would try to affect that with other background characters, just none really caught on except perhaps Ensign Rowe. But she was more fully formed as a background character out the gate. It wasn't necessarily organic in her case. But yeah, that's it. That's a lot of Samaritan Snare. Oh, and last note. So I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, maybe we see the Packlids one other time briefly in TNG or maybe DS9, and we don't ever really see them or mentioned again until Lower Decks. So if you like Packlids and want to see more, watch Lower Decks. All right. Do you have a unit of measure you'd like to pick out for this episode?
Oh, right. I forgot. What the hey? I was not lied to, but I've been told that Picard is an Earl Grey tea drinker, and this one he's having coffee. What the flip?
Oh, I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice that.
I feel betrayed. I was like, that was one thing I also knew about this character, was that everybody loved him and he drank Earl Grey tea and he's drinking coffee. Thanks, like, everybody for ruining that.
He definitely drinks Earl Grey tea, but that doesn't mean he can't not ever drink coffee.
He is a fictitious character who is solely and only chained to only having Earl Grey tea and nothing else. He can't have a
I don't
palate.
know. Big Earl Grey, I hope they're paying Sir Stewart still to this day, because I feel like I'm in the 95% who had never heard of Earl Grey tea before TNG. And now I feel like I'm part of the 95% that only knows about it today because of TNG. Even if you're only 10 years old, but the only reason you know of it now is because Earl Grey was established in the zeitgeist via TNG.
But my unit of measure is a sandwich.
Oh, I thought you were going to pick cups of coffee. But anyway.
No, I do mean a sandwich. Even though I use that unit of measurement in a different podcast.
So I'll go ahead and go first. I'll give it 3.5 sandwiches. But it would be a solid, regular, but admirable 3 only, if not for 2 things for me. One is the pathos and the character development that we just talked about with Wesley and Picard. And like I said, this will have implications for Picard's character going forward. Big implications. Not what happens in this episode, but the themes that are furthered in this episode. So that would be one reason for me to bump it up higher than a typical 3. But then also, I just have that nostalgia of the Packlids sticking in my brain from those probably 2 times I saw it air in this year. And it's just one of those memories that is just stuck with me forever, which made me so delighted when they started popping up in Lower Decks. And I think we've had this conversation before, but it's kind of like this affinity I've always had for Snaggletooth in A New Hope, because I had that similar kind of relationship where it was just kind of only, well, with the Packlids, it's not just their appearance, it's their personality and speech, but Snaggletooth, it was just the look of the costume and the alien that made that character stick in my head so hard from Star Wars.
Sweet.
And of course, how delighted was I that we would see that alien race a lot more, like in Clone Wars and Rebels, etc. Similar to seeing the Packlids show up a lot in Lower Decks.
Well, as for me, I think I will give it a 4.
Wow.
4 sandwiches, just because I'm a hungry man, and Picard was feeding me them sandwiches. I wouldn't have it in quarters. I'd have 4 actual sandwiches instead. And with the crust on, because I'm a crust kind of guy. I'm a big sandwich guy. What can I say?
Wow.
Yeah, maybe it's just because this is the first time I've kind of seen the Samaritan Snare. I've probably seen it in other things, but just the way they handled it this way was clever. It made sure to not have Riker going guns blazing, and they were able to function as a not unit of measure, but they were able to function as a ship without Captain Picard, which was nice. And we got some backstory to Captain Picard, which was nice and well delivered. So yeah, and there was a dilemma at the very end during the bamboozlement where Picard's life could have definitely been in jeopardy. Maybe that could have been done earlier on, but I think it was done about the right time. Anyway, Eric, anything else left on the table?
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention how eventually, once Riker and the crew realize what's going on, they kind of out-trick the tricksters.
Yes.
And it was just interesting because a couple days ago, or actually one day ago, I watched the new premiere of Doctor Who. And it just reminded me of that episode that I just saw a day ago of Doctor Who, because there's an element of that employed. And I thought, oh, look at that. Okay. Of tricking the trickster. There was an element of that in that episode. So, okay.
Or just go watch The Italian Job. Or I guess
Sure.
Ocean's 11.
I've only seen the remake once of Italian Job.
That's fair.
And what was the other one you mentioned?
I said Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 8.
I've not seen any movies in that franchise, but
Oh, and the not Dugers, no, sorry, but the bamboozled individuals. Again, I always forget their names. They reminded me of. Sorry, I know this is going to trigger you. My apologies, but they remind me of Baron Harkonnen for some reason. Denis Villeneuve's version.
yeah. But what'd you say? What'd you call the bamboozlers?
The bamboozled, because I forget their names as usual. It just reminded me of Denis Villeneuve's Baron Harkonnen.
But do you think of the Harkonnens as the bamboozled?
Whatever this species name is that I keep forgetting.
Oh, the Packlids.
That trick the Enterprise. Thank you. The Packlids reminded me. Their appearance also visually looked like Baron Harkonnen from Denis Villeneuve's film.
Oh,
Pardon me.
I thought you were saying how the Baron was like the trickster in that first movie, or I mean the novel, and then he gets outwitted. That's what I thought you meant at first.
Of course. And the last thing I will say is, of course, I gave a very brief mention, and again, like I said, Caleb is somewhere in the rafters or in the internet somewhere. He's having a chuckle because we have Picard saying, what is it? He's saying Nausicaans, if I recall. Yeah, he says that. And it would be quite hilarious, given that this is 1989, so that's 5 years after the fact. No, yes, 5 years after the fact. But then later on, and I think it's 2003 when they get the rights, eventually Disney does a English dub version, a new version of that, of course. We're not going to talk about the Warriors of the Wind, of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, one of, not Studio Ghibli, but Hayao Miyazaki's one of his first, own creator films. And who is Patrick Stewart playing but Lord Yupa, who is a companion of the titular character Nausicaa herself. So I think that is fate or whatever, or something's going on in this simulation where
I see what you're saying.
Figured that one out, just top of my head, just completely thought of the one that had Nausicaa and Patrick Stewart. Anyway, I'm done for now, Eric.
And of course, Miyazaki was inspired partially by Dune to make Nausicaa and Mononoke.
Well, not just that, but also Mobius.
Sure. Well, closing out the show today, this is Eric.
This was Isaac.
And until next time,
may the wind be at our backs.
Beware Romulans bearing gifts.